Well, I think we know that she had drowning, and they're saying she had atherosclerosis, which means that she had some clogging of the arteries, some narrowing, and that she also. The question is, how did they all combine to kill her?
The applause ended, but the truth remained. Autopsy reports unsealed the shocking final chapters of R&B legends, exposing hidden struggles, violent endings, and silent battles their music could never confess. Whitney Houston. The night was supposed to be triumphant. The Beverly Hilton Hotel, February 2012. Music executives filled the building. The air buzzed with anticipation of Whitney Houston's long-awaited return. She was the voice of a generation, a woman who had turned every ballad into thunder. Yet when the door opened to Suite 434, reality was cruelly different. Inside, Whitney was found submerged in a hotel bathtub. The world mourned, but the coroner's report revealed the full weight of what happened. The official autopsy declared cause of death, drowning, effects of atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use. This conclusion was shocking, not because it mentioned drugs, but because of how multiple forces collided. Drowning alone is tragic, yet the report pointed to arteries hardened with plaque, evidence of long-term cardiovascular disease. Cocaine in her bloodstream compounded the danger, accelerating her heart rate, narrowing her vessels, and straining a body already weakened by years of pressure and stress. Fans saw her as a star with boundless energy. The autopsy showed a body exhausted from carrying too much weight, chemically and emotionally. Her heart was already fragile. Cocaine pushed it further. The water, silent and still, became the final setting. There were bruises noted on her body, injuries that appeared consistent with frantic attempts at resuscitation. They told of desperate efforts to save her, but the internal evidence spoke louder. The heart and arteries revealed years of damage. The toxicology screen explained how relapse had returned to haunt her. Whitney Houston's final performance was not on a stage. It was written in medical language across a coroner's report. The tragedy was not simply that she drowned. It was that her body had been in battle for years, a battle between fame, addiction, and a fragile heart. The revelation forces us to see her not just as a superstar, but as a human being. The autopsy stripped away the glitter and reminded the world that biology never bows to applause. Michael Jackson. June 25, 2009. News spread in seconds. Michael Jackson was dead at 50. The king of pop, a man whose music reshaped global culture, collapsed in a rented Los Angeles mansion. Fans worldwide prayed it was false, but the autopsy confirmed the truth. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office ruled cause of death, acute propofol intoxication with contributory benzodiazepines. The manner of death was homicide. Propofol is not a sleeping pill. It is a surgical anesthetic, meant to be administered only in hospitals under machines that monitor every heartbeat and breath. The autopsy revealed high levels of propofol in his blood, alongside other sedatives such as lorazepam and midazolam. This combination overwhelmed his system. Toxicology reports painted a devastating picture. His veins showed punctures from repeated injections. His thin frame carried scars from years of medical treatment and cosmetic procedures. His organs were otherwise healthy. The heart had not failed from natural causes. Instead, medicine itself had become a weapon. Michael's insomnia was well known. He had long struggled to rest, but the escalation of his treatment was staggering. His bedroom had been transformed into an improvised operating theater. Propofol dripped into his veins as though he were undergoing surgery, but without the monitors, safeguards, or team required to keep a patient alive. The autopsy revealed not only his cause of death, but the betrayal of medical ethics. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, faced trial because those forensic documents proved the reckless use of drugs outside any safe standard. The coroner's file, clinical and detached, became evidence in a courtroom that determined accountability. What makes the revelation so shocking is not just that Michael Jackson died from propofol, it is that the drug, designed to keep patients safe during surgery, was misused as a nightly aid to force sleep on a man crushed by pressure. His death was not simply an accident. The autopsy labeled it homicide, a rare and devastating verdict for someone of his stature. Michael Jackson's final legacy was not just the music that shook the world, it was also a stark warning. No amount of fame can erase the consequences when medicine becomes misuse, when trust becomes dependency, and when professional boundaries collapse. Prince? April 21, 2016. The news stunned the world. Prince, the purple genius who had redefined music, was found unresponsive in an elevator at Paisley Park, his home and creative sanctuary in Minnesota. Fans mourned the loss of a man who had seemed untouchable, always ahead of his time, always in command of his art. But when the coroner's report was released, it told a story more devastating than anyone could have imagined. The official autopsy listed the cause of death as accidental fentanyl toxicity. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, more than 50 times stronger than heroin, a drug so potent that micrograms separate a therapeutic dose from a lethal one. Toxicology tests showed extremely high levels of fentanyl in his system, more than enough to shut down breathing and silence a body in minutes. The shocking revelation was that Prince had not intentionally overdosed. Investigators determined he had taken counterfeit painkillers, pills that looked like Vicodin but were laced with fentanyl. He believed he was swallowing relief for hip pain, a lingering injury from years of legendary performances. Instead, he ingested a lethal chemical disguised as safety. The autopsy findings confirmed what the investigation revealed. His organs showed no signs of long-term drug abuse. His body was otherwise healthy for a man of 57. There was no evidence of alcohol, no illicit cocktail of substances. It was one counterfeit pill that ended him. The coroner's report became a testimony of deception. In a world where counterfeit pills flood markets, Prince had become another victim. The medical language, detached and clinical, wrote the final chapter of a life built on authenticity. A man who had spent his career fighting for artistic control had lost his life because control over what entered his body had been stolen by a counterfeit. The revelation reminds us how silent and merciless fentanyl can be. Prince did not overdose by choice. He was poisoned by a system of pills that looked real but carried death. His autopsy is not just a document of tragedy. It is a warning carved in science. No fame, no wealth, no genius can shield anyone from the modern dangers of counterfeit drugs. Aaliyah. August 25, 2001. The rising star known as the Princess of R&B had just finished filming her final music video in the Bahamas. At only 22 years old, Aaliyah had already redefined style, performance, and sound. She boarded a small twin-engine Cessna, eager to return home. Moments later, the plane crashed shortly after takeoff, killing everyone on board. Fans were devastated, but the autopsy revealed details that shocked the world even more. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as severe burns and head trauma. Toxicology confirmed no drugs or alcohol in her system. She was clear, sober, focused. The tragedy was not in her choices, but in the chain of circumstances surrounding her. The autopsy also confirmed what investigators discovered about the flight. The aircraft had been overloaded, carrying far more weight than it was designed to lift safely. Luggage and equipment pushed limits past reason. Worse still, the pilot was found to be unlicensed for the flight and had traces of alcohol in his system. Aaliyah's body bore the brutal evidence of impact and fire. The coroner noted fractures, burns, and trauma consistent with a catastrophic crash. These were not details meant to sensationalize. They were evidence of the unforgiving truth of physics. No amount of fame could rewrite the math of weight and lift. No future album could change the chemistry in the pilot's bloodstream. The revelation that Aaliyah had been placed on a plane that was both overloaded and piloted by someone impaired was more than shocking. It was enraging. The autopsy showed she was healthy, strong, and clear-minded. It was negligence and poor decisions around her that stole her life. Her autopsy does not only tell us how she died, it exposes the industry pressures that forced a young artist onto a plane that should never have left the ground. Deadlines and urgency outweighed safety. The result was a tragedy immortalized in medical language: severe burns, head trauma, fatal injuries consistent with aviation disaster. Aaliyah's final record is not only in her music, but in the reminder her autopsy provides. Safety must never be compromised. For her fans, the report was not just a conclusion. It was a heartbreak written in the language of negligence and loss. Marvin Gaye, April 1st, 1984. The music world was celebrating his 45th birthday when tragedy struck. Marvin Gaye, the voice behind What's Going On and Sexual Healing, was shot inside his parents' Los Angeles home. Fans struggled to process the loss. The man who had defined soul music's golden era was gone. But it was the coroner's autopsy that revealed the brutal truth in the coldest detail. The cause of death was listed as gunshot wounds to the chest, with bullets perforating his heart, lungs, and liver. The description left no space for metaphor. These were not vague words about passing or collapse. They were precise notes of destruction: the trajectory of metal, the organs it tore through, the vital systems it silenced. The autopsy also revealed the manner of death: homicide. Marvin's own father had pulled the trigger after a heated argument inside their home. The body's evidence supported the official account. 2 shots had been fired. One passed directly through the chest, fatally wounding him. The other struck at a downward angle, confirming what eyewitnesses later testified. He was already collapsing when the second shot came. What makes this revelation so shocking is the intimacy. This was not a faceless act of violence in an alley. It was a domestic argument that spiraled into something irreversible. The autopsy findings painted a picture of immediate fatal injury. There was no prolonged struggle, no chance for survival. For fans, the cold language of the autopsy was almost unbearable. To see words like perforating heart in place of love songs was a violent reminder that legends are not immune to the tragedies of ordinary households. Marvin's voice had lifted movements and healed souls. Yet, in death, his body told a story of bullets, rage, and family collapse. The autopsy's revelation is not simply that Marvin Gaye was killed. It is that the very home where he should have found safety became his final stage, and the body's last performance was written in diagrams and wound measurements. Sam Cooke, December 11, 1964. Sam Cooke, the smooth tenor who gave the world "A Change Is Gonna Come" and "You Send Me," was gunned down in Los Angeles at only 33 years old. News reports were chaotic. Conflicting stories circulated. But the autopsy provided details that silenced speculation, even as it fueled controversy. The Los Angeles coroner's office reported that Cooke died of a gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet pierced his heart and lungs, killing him almost instantly. The shot had been fired by the manager of a motel who claimed self-defense after a late-night altercation. The autopsy was clear: 1 shot, 1 trajectory, 1 instant. But the context surrounding it has never been as straightforward. While the coroner's report laid out the medical facts, it could not answer the deeper questions that still haunt his legacy. Why was he in that motel? Why did events escalate to gunfire? Why were his final moments filled with confusion rather than clarity. The report revealed abrasions and bruises on his body, consistent with a struggle. Toxicology showed no alcohol at lethal levels and no drugs in his system. He was not incapacitated by chemicals. He was alert, alive, and fighting. The bullet was the sole killer. The shocking revelation here is not just the cause of death. It is the way the autopsy stripped the myth from the mystery. Fans wanted to believe the story was more complex, maybe even conspiratorial. But the coroner's files spoke bluntly. The body told its truth. A man shot through the heart. A life ended in seconds. For some, that conclusion was enough. For others, it was only the beginning of decades of suspicion. But the autopsy cannot speculate. It only records. And it recorded the final truth of Sam Cooke's body. Fatal gunshot wound to the chest, heart and lungs destroyed, death nearly instantaneous. Cooke's music had carried hope and civil rights anthems. His autopsy carried only silence. Yet that silence still speaks, reminding us how fragile legends truly are when confronted with violence. Gerald Levert. November 10, 2006. News broke that Gerald Levert, the soulful baritone behind hits like Casanova and Baby Hold On To Me, had died unexpectedly at only 40 years old. Fans were stunned. His voice had always carried power, but his passing seemed sudden and without explanation. When the coroner's report was released, the revelations inside were as heartbreaking as they were shocking. The autopsy listed the cause of death as acute intoxication from a mixture of prescription and over-the-counter medications. The toxicology report identified narcotic painkillers, anti-anxiety drugs, and antihistamines. A note was made that pneumonia had also been present at the time of death. The conclusion? An accidental overdose. What shocked many was not just the presence of medication, but the combination. Each drug on its own might have been manageable. Together, they created a storm inside his body. The sedative effects of the opioids slowed his breathing. The anti-anxiety medication deepened the sedation. The antihistamines compounded the drowsiness. Pneumonia made oxygen intake even harder. The autopsy's cold language painted a grim picture of a man whose body simply could not fight back against the cocktail circulating in his system. The report also revealed details about his weight and cardiovascular health. Like many performers, Gerald carried the burden of long tours, demanding schedules and pressures that made rest rare. His body bore the signs of exhaustion and strain. In the end, it was not one dramatic choice, but a combination of everyday struggles that took him. The autopsy's revelations remind us that addiction is not the only danger. Polypharmacy, the mixing of multiple prescriptions, can be just as deadly. Gerald was not chasing a high. He was treating pain, calming anxiety, fighting illness. Yet the coroner's office confirmed what the body already knew. Too much of everything left him defenseless. Gerald Levert's death was not the fall of a reckless man. It was the silencing of a voice, trying to manage too many battles at once. His autopsy is a warning about the risks of medicine without coordination, and a painful reminder of how even careful men can be undone by an overload the body cannot bear. Lisa, Left Eye, Lopes. April 25, 2002. In the lush countryside of Honduras, Lisa Lopes, better known as Left Eye of TLC, was traveling with friends when their SUV veered off the road. The crash killed her instantly. She was only 30 years old. For fans, her death felt senseless, a cruel end for an artist known for her fiery personality and creative genius. But the coroner's report revealed the brutal mechanics of what happened. The autopsy confirmed that Lisa died from severe trauma to the head and chest after being ejected from the vehicle during the rollover. Her body bore fractures, lacerations, and internal injuries consistent with high-speed impact. Toxicology results were clean. She was not impaired. Her death was not caused by substances. It was the direct result of blunt force trauma. The shocking detail came from how preventable it was. The report made clear she had not been wearing a seatbelt. Ejection from the vehicle sealed her fate. Others in the car survived, some with injuries, but none as devastating. The autopsy could not capture the chaos of the moment, but it documented the silent fact: restraint might have saved her. There were also haunting details in the days before her death. She had spoken about feeling pursued by spiritual forces. She had even been involved in another car accident earlier in the trip that claimed the life of a young boy. By the time the SUV carrying her rolled, Lisa was wrestling with fate and mortality in ways only her diary could capture. The coroner's office did not note these emotions, but the cold record of skull fractures and chest trauma testified to how violently life ended. Her autopsy stripped away speculation and superstition. It confirmed that her death was not mysterious, but mechanical. Steel, speed, and momentum collided with bone and flesh. The most shocking revelation was not in what was hidden, but in what was obvious. No matter how powerful or creative, no human body can survive unprotected against physics. Lisa, left eye. Lopes left behind a legacy of empowerment, rebellion, and creativity. Her autopsy leaves behind a warning carved into medical notes: seatbelts matter, even for legends. Donny Hathaway. January 13, 1979. Donny Hathaway was found lifeless outside the Essex House Hotel in New York City. The voice that had carried gospel roots into soulful anthems like A Song for You and Someday We'll All Be Free was suddenly gone. He was only 33 years old, and the world of R&B lost one of its purest storytellers. But it was the autopsy, not the headlines, that revealed the shocking clarity of his final moments. The official report determined that Hathaway died from massive injuries sustained after falling from the 15th floor of his hotel room. The list of trauma was devastating: multiple skull fractures, crushed ribs, ruptured organs, catastrophic internal bleeding. The coroner's language was cold, but it made the reality undeniable. There had been no chance of survival. The impact alone had ended his life instantly. Investigators found no signs of a struggle inside the hotel suite. There were no bruises or wounds consistent with a fight. The window in his room had been deliberately removed, leaving behind only an empty frame and the silence of unanswered questions. Toxicology screens revealed no drugs or alcohol at lethal levels. His body was clean. His mind was not clouded by chemicals. The conclusion was suicide. For those who knew Donny, the autopsy's verdict was both unsurprising and unbearable. He had long struggled with severe mental illness, specifically paranoid schizophrenia. Friends and collaborators had witnessed his torment. He often spoke of voices in his head, of being followed, of conspiracies that seemed real only to him. Medication had been prescribed, but compliance was inconsistent. The battle raged silently within him, even as his music gave hope to millions. The tragedy deepened when paired with his career trajectory. In the early 1970s, Hathaway's voice soared. His duets with Roberta Flack won Grammy Awards. His solo records became cultural landmarks. Yet behind the applause, his condition worsened. By the mid-1970s, he had been hospitalized several times. Concerts were canceled, sessions interrupted. His genius was chained to an illness that left him terrified and exhausted. The autopsy did not record his fears, but the absence of drugs or alcohol confirmed something haunting. His death was not clouded by intoxication. It was a decision born from pain, not impairment. The removal of the window pane spoke of deliberate action, a chilling preparation for the leap. This was not a stumble. It was the last act of a man at war with himself. The most shocking part of Donny Hathaway's autopsy is how final it felt. The clinical notes left no ambiguity. It was not foul play, not an accident. It was the collapse of a soul too burdened by unseen battles. For fans, the revelation was devastating because it transformed his death from mystery to painful truth. He had been suffering longer than most realized, and the music that healed others could not heal him. Yet even here, in the stark light of medical language, there is a legacy. Donny Hathaway's autopsy is more than a record of physical injuries. It is a call to confront the silence around mental health, particularly in communities where it is often ignored or stigmatized. In 1979, mental illness was rarely discussed openly. For a black male artist in the spotlight, the pressures were even greater. His autopsy reminds us that genius and despair can live in the same body, and ignoring one can destroy the other. To this day, fans replay his recordings with a mix of awe and sorrow. Songs like "This Christmas" fill homes with joy, while "Someday We'll All Be Free" reads like a prophecy of liberation that never came for him. The medical examiner's words closed his life, but his music keeps asking the question, how do we protect brilliance when it is haunted? The expanded revelation is this: Donny Hathaway's autopsy is not just about broken bones and ruptured organs. It is about the weight of untreated illness, the consequences of silence, and the reminder that even legends need saving hands. Amy Winehouse. July 23, 2011. The streets of Camden, North London, were quiet as news spread that Amy Winehouse, one of the most distinctive voices of her generation, had been found dead in her home. She was just 27. The headlines quickly invoked the 27 Club, that infamous list of artists who died young. But the autopsy did not deal in myths. It dealt in measurements, evidence, and truths the tabloids could never capture. The post-mortem report revealed that Amy died from acute alcohol poisoning. Toxicology results showed her blood alcohol concentration was 416 milligrams per deciliter. To understand the gravity of that number, it is more than 5 times the legal limit for driving in the United Kingdom. At such levels, the body shuts down. Breathing slows, reflexes fade, consciousness slips away. For Amy, it was enough to stop her heart forever. What made the revelation even more shocking was her recent progress. Friends and family testified that she had been sober for weeks before her death. The coroner's inquest confirmed this detail, noting that her tolerance to alcohol had significantly decreased during that time. When she relapsed, the same amounts she had once consumed with dangerous regularity became catastrophic. Her body could no longer withstand the volume. The autopsy made clear what headlines obscured. Amy did not simply drink heavily. She drank after a period of sobriety, when her body was most vulnerable and the result was fatal. The autopsy also dispelled other rumors. No illegal drugs were present in her system. There were no opiates, no cocaine, no heroin, no mysterious cocktail. This was not a complicated overdose. It was alcohol alone. The coroner, Dr. Shirley Radcliffe, described the death as death by misadventure, a British legal term for accidental death due to risky behavior. It was blunt but accurate. Amy had relapsed, and the relapse was enough to kill her. The report described her organs in clinical detail. Her lungs, liver, and brain bore the marks of long-term alcohol abuse, though none had completely failed at the time of death. The real killer was the blood alcohol concentration, which overwhelmed every system. The coroner's findings were like a mathematical equation. A young body, weakened by years of damage, faced a sudden flood of ethanol. The result was inevitable. But the most heartbreaking revelation lies in what those numbers symbolized. Amy Winehouse had spent her career singing about her demons. Her song "Rehab" had been both a global hit and a painful self-portrait. She had battled substance abuse publicly, her struggles magnified by paparazzi lenses and tabloid headlines. Yet the autopsy reminded the world that behind the spectacle was a young woman fighting a biological war. Sobriety lowered her defenses. Relapse struck harder than ever. The coroner's verdict also raised questions about the culture surrounding her. Friends said she had been isolated. Security staff were present at her house, but no one fully understood how dangerous relapse could be after abstinence. The autopsy's numbers became a teaching tool. Doctors and addiction specialists pointed to Amy's case as an example of how recovery is not linear, how the body changes quickly, and how one misstep can be lethal. The expanded truth of her autopsy is not only that she died from alcohol poisoning, it is that her death carried lessons about addiction the world still struggles to absorb. Tolerance is not permanent. Recovery is fragile. Support must be constant, not occasional. For Amy, a relapse was not simply a bad night, it was the end. Her legacy, however, is not sealed in a coroner's file. The autopsy may have captured her death in numbers and toxicology charts, but her music remains raw, alive, and painfully honest. Songs like Back to Black and Love is a Losing Game sound different when you know the medical truth. They become testimonies of a woman who understood her struggles and put them into melody, even when the world laughed at her pain. The most shocking part of Amy Winehouse's autopsy is how ordinary the cause of death was. Not a mystery, not a conspiracy. Alcohol, a relapse, a body that could not fight anymore. The coroner's words were simple, but their implications remain vast. Her autopsy reminds us that addiction is not glamorous, and relapse is not weakness. It is dangerous, it is biology, and sometimes it is fatal. Amy Winehouse's final chapter, written in medical terms, is a plea for compassion. A plea to take relapse seriously, to treat recovery as constant work, and to never underestimate how quickly a life can end when support collapses. If these revelations moved you, honor these legends by sharing their truths, supporting mental health, confronting addiction, and subscribe for more untold stories. Memory is powerful, but action can save lives.